On December 17, 1967, Harold Holt, the then Prime Minister of Australia, went missing while swimming at Cheviot Beach. The circumstances surrounding his disappearance were mysterious and unexplained. Holt, an avid swimmer, was known to regularly take swims in the ocean despite the sometimes perilous conditions. That fateful day, though, something felt different. Several eyewitnesses reported an eerie calmness in the air, a sensation of unease that settled over the beach just moments before Holt entered the waves. It was as though the very atmosphere had thickened, an unnatural heaviness hanging over the water. It wasn't just the wind or the ocean currents that seemed different. It was the very feeling that seemed to permeate the environment. Something was watching, something unseen. People later claimed that just before Holt entered the water, a cold gust of wind swept through the area, and with it came an eerie silence, as though the world had momentarily stopped. As Holt waded into the water, those present on the beach felt an unexplainable pull to the sea, a primal attraction to the depths as though the ocean itself was calling them. A few locals later described feeling a sense of foreboding, as if something beyond human comprehension was unfolding before them. The chilling sensation didn't go unnoticed. Those who had been on the beach that day would never forget the sense that something was waiting, lurking, just beneath the surface of the water. The air was still, but there was an undeniable tension that hung heavy in the atmosphere. As Holt entered the water that day, an unusual figure was spotted standing atop the cliffs above Cheviot Beach, watching the events unfold from a distance. Witnesses described the figure as a tall, shadowy presence, standing motionless against the horizon. Some locals claimed it was a person, while others argued it was not a human at all. Regardless of what it truly was, the figure seemed to have been standing still for an uncomfortably long time, not moving, not even reacting to the world around it. It wasn't until after Holt disappeared that reports of the figure started to gain traction. People spoke of it as an ominous, ghostly shape, a shadow in the corner of their vision that was only visible for brief moments before vanishing entirely. The more the story spread, the more unnerving it became. Some believed it was a spirit, a guardian of the beach perhaps, or even a harbinger of doom. Others suggested that the figure was not human, but something far older, a supernatural force that had been watching the beach long before Holt ever set foot there. One local, an elderly man who had lived in the area for decades, claimed that the figure had been seen at other times too, whenever there was an unsettling event on the beach. But no one knew for sure who or what this figure truly was. Was it a spirit that had been watching over the land for centuries? Or was it something else, something far darker? The strangest part of the story, however, came from the ocean itself. Days after Harold Holt vanished, reports began circulating of sightings of strange figures beneath the water, shadowy forms that seemed to move just beneath the waves, visible for only a few seconds before disappearing. These figures were described as indistinct, like dark shapes that seemed to flicker with the current, as though they weren't quite solid, like a shadow cast by something far deeper and far older than any human could comprehend. Divers, some of whom ventured into the water to search for Holt's body, reported an overwhelming sense of dread as they descended into the depths. One diver in particular recounted a chilling experience in which he saw the silhouette of a man almost identical to Holt, drifting slowly beneath him, only for the figure to vanish when he tried to approach. But it wasn't just divers who had seen the shadows. On several occasions, swimmers claimed to feel as though something was following them, brushing against their legs or brushing past them in the water. They were never able to explain it, but the sensation lingered long after they left the water. Some even described the water's surface as unnaturally still, almost as if something below was manipulating. The most unsettling part of the whole mystery was that Despite all the efforts to search for Holt, no trace of his body was ever found. Days turned into weeks, and the search efforts grew more desperate, but the ocean kept its secret. How could a man, an experienced swimmer, simply vanish without a trace? Theories quickly emerged, ranging from the idea that Holt had simply drowned and been carried away by the powerful currents, to more bizarre suggestions that he had been abducted or was in hiding. But none of these explanations seemed to fully fit the facts. Holt was a strong swimmer, and while the currents at Cheviot Beach could be treacherous, they did not explain why his body was never recovered. Even after exhaustive searches by military personnel and civilian volunteers, nothing was found. No wreckage, no signs of struggle, no body, nothing. It was as if the ocean itself had swallowed him whole. The absence of any concrete evidence only added fuel to the growing speculation that something more than just a drowning had taken place. And in the years following his disappearance, the mystery of Holt's fate began to take on an increasingly supernatural aura. Could the ocean have claimed him? Was something darker at play? The unanswered questions haunted those who sought the truth, leaving behind a trail of unanswered mysteries that still linger to this day. In the years following Harold Holt's disappearance, many visitors to Cheviot Beach began to report strange occurrences of their own. A common theme among those who ventured to the beach was the sensation that someone, was watching them. This feeling wasn't just a fleeting thought. It was something that seemed to linger, a palpable presence in the air. Some visitors described hearing faint whispers on the wind, whispers that seemed to come from the direction of the water. These whispers were described as soft and indistinct, but there was something in them that made the hairs on the back of their neck stand up. One person, a tourist who had ventured to the beach in the years following the disappearance, claimed to have heard his name whispered from the ocean while walking along the shore at dusk. He turned to see nothing but the waves crashing against the rocks, but the whispers continued, growing louder and more urgent. Others spoke of hearing voices on the wind, like the echoes of long-forgotten conversations. The strange sounds seemed to come from nowhere, yet they felt intimately tied to the ocean itself, as though the sea were trying to communicate with them. As strange as the whispers were, they were not the only supernatural occurrences linked to Holt's disappearance. Many believed that the beach was haunted by spirits, perhaps the spirits of past swimmers who had met untimely ends in the waters of Cheviot Beach. Some theorized that Holt had crossed paths with these spirits, disturbing something long buried beneath the waves. It was a belief that was fueled by the strange, eerie feeling that settled over the beach whenever someone mentioned Holt's name. Locals told stories of other disappearances, people who had walked along the cliffs or swum in the water only to vanish without explanation. Some believed that the spirits of the lost were trapped, forever wandering the waters, never able to escape. Others believed that the ocean itself was a gateway to another realm, one that claimed the souls of those who ventured too far into its depths. Holt's disappearance, many argued, had merely been a part of this larger, darker force at work. In the years after his disappearance, rumors began to circulate that Holt had been seen, or at least his shadow, on more than one occasion. People who had visited Cheviot Beach and its surrounding cliffs spoke of seeing a figure standing near the rocks at dusk, watching the sea. This figure was described as wearing a dark suit, much like Holt was known to wear. But when people tried to approach, the figure would vanish into thin air. Witnesses claimed that the figure had an otherworldly quality, something both familiar and foreign. Some said they felt an overwhelming sense of sadness or longing when they saw it, while others claimed it felt as though the figure was trying to communicate something, though they could never understand what. These sightings were often accompanied by a sense of profound unease, as though something was not quite right, as though the figure had not truly returned, but had instead been conjured by something darker. In the wake of Harold Holt's disappearance, strange theories began to surface. Among them was a deeply unsettling one, an occult connection to Holt's disappearance. It began with whispers among spiritualists and locals who had long been familiar with the land's dark history. These people spoke of Cheviot Beach as a place of ancient rituals and forgotten rites, passed down through generations but mostly ignored by the modern world. According to these theories, Holt had unknowingly trespassed on sacred ground, where rituals tied to the sea were still practiced by secretive societies. The idea was rooted in indigenous Australian folklore, which spoke of powerful water spirits and sea gods that demanded offerings to maintain peace with the human world. Theories suggested that Holt, with his regular swimming trips, might have been seen as a suitable offering to the ocean gods. A local historian, who had researched the area's early indigenous cultures, noted that the waters near Cheviot Beach were once thought to be a spiritual gateway between the physical and the spirit world. The water's mysterious depths were said to hide ancient, powerful forces that could take what they wanted. According to this line of thinking, Holt's disappearance was not just an accident or a drowning, it was a ritual sacrifice. And those who spoke of it believed the Prime Minister had been taken, his body never to return, swallowed by the ocean's dark depths in order to restore balance. Over time, more bizarre tales emerged, tying Holt's disappearance to larger occult conspiracies. Some theorized that Holt's sudden removal from the political stage had been orchestrated by a shadowy group, using the ritual as a means to keep him silent, hidden away. Others claimed that the government had been involved in a cover-up, using spiritual forces as part of their secret operations. The notion that Cheviot Beach might be a place where supernatural powers resided began to weave its way into the collective imagination of those who followed the mystery. One of the more unsettling elements of the paranormal lore surrounding Holt's disappearance were the repeated sightings of the shadowy figure on the cliffs above Cheviot Beach. These sightings were most prevalent on dark, stormy nights, when the moonlight barely touched the water and the air felt thick with anticipation. According to eyewitness accounts, the figure, standing tall and silent on the edge of the cliffs, would look out toward the water for hours at a time, never moving, never speaking. Locals described the figure as having a faint ghostly glow, though it was impossible to make out any specific features or details. Over the years, more people reported seeing the figure, but it was always in the same place, always just out of reach. Despite their best efforts, no one was able to get close enough to identify who or what it was. Several researchers who made trips to the area to investigate the phenomenon noted a strange magnetic pull toward the cliffs, as though the presence of the figure itself was compelling them to come closer, to understand. But whenever anyone ventured too close, the figure would vanish as mysteriously as it had appeared. The pattern of sightings continued, especially in the years surrounding the anniversary of Holt's disappearance. Those who had seen the figure described it as embodying both familiarity and dread. Its presence seemed oddly comforting, as if it were a protective spirit. Yet it also carried an air of warning, as if it were a reminder of the terrible fate that had befallen Holt. Some locals believed that this was Harold Holt himself, eternally watching over the beach and the waters that claimed him, unable to find peace. Others felt that it was something much more sinister, a dark entity bound to the cliffs, waiting for the next soul to claim. One of the most terrifying aspects of Harold Holt's disappearance was the eerie quiet that followed it. The ocean, despite the countless searches, seemed to refuse any closure. There were no waves of grief or horror from the ocean itself, only silence. The beach, once a place of leisure and normality, became something more ominous in the wake of Holt's vanishing. Swimmers who visited the beach after the disappearance began to describe a strange pull toward the ocean, a magnetic force, an overwhelming compulsion to enter the water. But it wasn't the sea's natural attraction that they felt. It was something more powerful, more sinister. Several people who ventured into the water alone after Holt's disappearance claimed to hear strange sounds beneath the surface. Voices, carried by the currents, words that they couldn't quite make out. In some cases, the whispers grew louder the deeper they swam, until it felt as if something was calling them to stay in the water, to surrender themselves to the depths. One tourist, a man who had swum at Cheviot Beach months after Holt's disappearance, recounted feeling the strange pull of the water, so strong it nearly consumed him. He described an overwhelming sensation that someone, or something, was beckoning him into the abyss. Just as he reached the point of no return, the feeling dissipated, and he managed to swim back to shore. Other visitors reported the same sensation, describing an almost hypnotic experience where they felt as if they were being led into the waves. Was it a natural phenomenon, or was there something more to it, an entity that resided beneath the water waiting for more souls to claim? As each year passed, the legend of Harold Holt and his disappearance only deepened. Locals began to notice a peculiar trend. On the anniversary of his vanishing, the atmosphere around Cheviot Beach seemed to change. The wind picked up, the ocean's waves became rougher, and there was a peculiar stillness in the air that made people uneasy. It was as if the beach itself was remembering Holt's disappearance and the events that followed. But it wasn't just the weather that seemed to change. It was the presence of the shadowy figure. Each year, without fail, it would reappear on the cliffs at dusk, standing motionless against the setting sun. Some visitors even reported seeing the figure move, as if it were now actively watching the horizon, waiting for something to happen. Those who saw the figure believed it was a symbol of Holt's restless spirit, trapped in an eternal vigil. Some felt that the figure was a warning, that the ocean was still watching, still waiting for more. It was also on these anniversaries that strange occurrences seemed to spike around the beach. Voices could be heard on the wind, and the ocean would seem more ominous than usual. The shadows in the waves appeared darker, more foreboding. Visitors would sometimes leave the beach in a hurry, too frightened to stay. The haunting presence of the shadow figure and the strange energy of the beach left them with an undeniable feeling that they were not alone. As time went on, the mystery of Harold Holt's disappearance remained officially unresolved. But for many, the paranormal theories provided an answer that was just as unsettling. For some, the notion that Holt had drowned was not enough. They believed that the Prime Minister had been taken by something far more mysterious and malevolent than an unfortunate accident. Others still clung to the idea that Holt had faked his death and lived in exile, but those who believed in the supernatural side of the story saw it as something else entirely. They believed that Holt's disappearance was part of a larger, darker pattern, a pattern connected to Cheviot Beach itself. The most chilling aspect of the whole mystery was the sense that Holt's disappearance had opened a door to the unknown, one that could never be closed. Holt's spirit, or perhaps something far older, far darker, was said to still haunt the area, forever trapped between the physical world and the supernatural one. Visitors to the beach still report strange occurrences, from the whispering winds to the shadowy figure that appears on the cliffs. It is as though Holt's disappearance left an imprint on the land, one that time cannot erase. In the end, the mystery of Harold Holt's disappearance transcends simple explanation. It has become a story of the unknown, of forces that defy understanding and linger far beyond our realm. The waters of Cheviot Beach continue to whisper, calling out to those who dare to listen, and the shadowy figure on the cliffs serves as a reminder that some mysteries are never meant to be solved.